You didn't think, Simon, if I'm right, that Beale would last that long, did you? You weren't sure about him after saying yes to Rangers, having said no to Wolves, and that he was staying with QPR.
Yeah,
everything that went with that.
I question the basis of the manner in which he operated. Because he was given an opportunity by QPR. He was an assistant manager, given an opportunity. He took the opportunity, and 5 minutes into his job, he gets a better one. And I don't like that kind of manager. I don't respect it. I think you need to earn the right to be able to make these decisions, and at least show a little bit of respect for those that have put you in a position of opportunity. But I do feel that the brief at Rangers, if the brief was, what was the brief, first and foremost? Because ultimately, if they were going to give him a fair amount of money and a fair crack of the whip, then you have to suggest that he wasn't given an ordinary amount of time. But if, as I said a couple of weeks ago, if you look at the starting point and you look at where he is a year later and there isn't any material changes, it becomes difficult to argue for him. And I think the toxicity that was beginning to be generated was what did for him, alongside, of course, the results, of course, the manner in which they went out of the Champions League. But then again, that's what's going to happen to Scottish sides, because they don't have the wherewithal to be able to compete in Europe right now. And then you look at it and say, the league performances, they were, losing to Celtic was always going to be a denotion. Yeah. And then you compound it by Aberdeen. So I think that the guy was already on a sticky wicket from the get-go, because I don't really think the fan base were enthralled by his appointments.
No. And I'm not entirely sure, Stuart, they know in what direction to go next. There is a feeling of unrest, and a feeling that the people at the top at Ibrox don't really know what to do next.
Well, there's a gulf, isn't there, between Rangers and Celtic, and as I was told and explained the situation up in Scotland, you're either first or you're nowhere in Scotland.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
Going up there as a manager and giving time to rebuild and all this game, that ends very quickly if you get beaten by Celtic. It's as simple as that. So where they go, I'm not sure manager-wise. Do managers look at it and say there's too much of a gulf there when you consider that you've got to get above Celtic at some stage?
Certain names in the frame. Kevin Muscat, we heard mentioned, Jesse Marsh, Graham Potter. Have they already spoken with Graham Potter? We don't know the answer to that one. Michael Beale, though, obviously didn't have his problems to seek at the end, especially with a 3-1 home defeat to Aberdeen. So he knew that the omens weren't good.
Listen, I feel I can carry on. It's disappointing the way that we've started in the league, for sure. For us to lose 3 out of the first 7 in the league is not acceptable. We all know that. I think we're much stronger than what we're showing at this moment in time with the players we got out. And listen, we have another game on Thursday and away at St Mirren, and the international break gives us a good chance to sit and have a conversation, I think. And it's fair to say that as a team at this moment in time, we have to do a lot better. That's me, my staff, and the players. Were all culpable after a result like that, which is below what is expected.
And it was, and he's paid the price with his job. Simon, stability. No doubt, at your time at Palace, you were seeking that, because that helps if you can somehow nail that.
If you can get the right, stability for stability's sake.
But Van Bronckhorst didn't last a year. Beale hasn't lasted a year. Somehow they're going to have to nail it down.
Well,
and get it right.
Van Bronckhorst was again the architect of his own downfall, because he was so weak in the interviews that he did in the Champions League and the comments that he made that blew back on him. The challenge for him is he gets them to a Europa Cup final, and then within weeks after that, all of a sudden he's under pressure in the Champions League because the expectation is slightly unrealistic. I make the case about expectations and the balance of Scottish football, but you've got to still remember that Rangers are still generating £80 million a year turnover. These are not clubs that aren't generating decent money. And when you compare them to clubs in other countries, like the Dutch clubs, they're still on a pound-for-pound basis, not too far either behind them or marginally in front of them. And so you look at it and say, what is happening in Scottish football? What is happening that Rangers are producing not a particularly good fare, but having an £80 million a year turnover and yet still losing money? What are these players getting paid up there, and what are they actually producing? And then you look at the managerial role. And Rangers has been, if you look at the managerial appointments they've made over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, since they've re-emerged, since they've become a Phoenix club, since they were brought back from the dead, and given a second opportunity, there hasn't been too many stellar names in managerial terms. Gerrard is a stellar name because he was a player. not a stellar name as a manager. And you look at it and say, what is it that Rangers need to do? Well, they need to get a better manager in the dugout that's capable of leading the football club forward with a far more robust look than the two guys they've had in previously. Gianni Van Bronckhorst, very decent fellow, I'm sure, struck me as very weak. Didn't come across. And I know that you shouldn't judge everything through the optics of the media, but it's part and parcel of the modern-day football manager's responsibility to bring those with him that think they're following him over the Alamo.
He got them into a European final.
He did indeed. I understand that. But they lost it. And ultimately, the starting point for Rangers is great, but the default setting is what are we doing in the league, and the other side of things takes care of itself in its own right. And then you go to Michael Beale, and I never really understood the appointment in the first place. What, because he did 3 months at QPR? And because he was assistant manager to...
well, he knew the club inside out because in his time there with Gerrard.
Lots of people know the club inside out.
Yeah, exactly.
Steve Kember, when he managed for me, knew the club inside out. Didn't make him a first-team manager.
Yeah.
You look at the argument of Kevin Muscat.
Yeah.
What, because Kevin Muscat can go around and kick everybody up in the air for 5 minutes. And that's what Kevin Muscat's stock and trade is. Well, they need, for me, a very, very significant manager in that dugout to be able to help them to bridge this gap between them and Celtic and lead this football club.
Do you think they've still got the draw to get a person like that? Well, a very significant individual in the dugout?
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I'm not sure that Celtic are producing the same sort of financial outcomes as Rangers, yet their team is far better on the pitch. And why is that? I suspect because their boardroom is better. Because with respect... Come on, look at some of the nonsense we've seen from Rangers. We sat in that boardroom when they played away to Celtic, and the silly arguments about which shirt sponsor is going to go on the front of their shirt because the owners of Rangers own a car franchise.
It's
and
that
sort of small-mindedness.
Yes, exactly.
And I felt to myself, this is not a club that's being led from the front. Yeah. This is a club that's running alongside itself and living on former glories.
Yeah, and this it's a considerable period of time since this happened, Stuart. But not that long ago, in the 80s, late 80s, this was a club that Souness was attracting the likes of Butcher and Woods and Roberts and Haitley and Wilkins and all the others that went with it. And now, you see where they are. And the people who gathered in Glasgow on Saturday before the announcement of Beale's sacking are acutely aware of that. And what they want is those times again now. But they're a long way off from them.
Well, they certainly are. So, I remember that era when all the best, well, certainly a few of the best English players were going north of the border because they were getting paid a lot more than they were in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Is one of the main reasons behind that. But they're a mile off that at this moment.
Yeah.
To attract top players from the Premier League to go up there, to galvanise the club, to push the club forward. I don't know whether it's not just a manager that's needed. It's a bit more than a manager that's needed. It's a management team that's needed. I mean,
yes.
Simon alluded to the fact maybe more leadership's needed, boardroom level and beyond. I'm not suggesting the board of directors and ownership a change there, but maybe a better structure than of recent times.
Well, we're here to take your calls. Rangers fans, if you want to get in touch, please do. 03717 223344. Was it almost inevitable that Michael Beale would head to the exit door after losing in the Champions League, losing to Celtic, losing to Aberdeen at the weekend? Was it almost inevitable? You can shoot me a message if you want, 81089. Who do you think should be next? Muscat, Marsh, Graham Potter. Simon saying a significant name. But are the people at the top of the football club able to attract that significant name?
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.